As a sliver of cold moonlight in an 1843 Tübingen midnight slanted across that precarious yellow tower on the banks of the Neckar, the air was steeped in the faint brine of the river and the stark texture of dried ink. Within a small chamber shrouded by heavy wooden beams, where the subtle murmur of flowing water could be heard, an old man with silver-white hair and eyes reflecting a profound sense of universal desolation sat quietly, opening his empty hands. He was not battling the clamorous auditory hallucinations in his mind. Instead, on a piece of wrinkled parchment, he recorded a fragment concerning the departure of the gods in an exquisite, ethereal script. He was Friedrich Hölderlin, the most brilliant and somber lone star of German Romanticism. This is a chronicle of how restraint erupts into power, and how silence is transmutated into nobility. The genesis of Friedrich Hölderlin's life held none of a genius's characteristic lightness. Instead, it was a deep blue foundation woven from the most rigorous family heritage and the sorrow of early orphanhood amidst the dark green mountains of Swabia. As a youth born with an almost pathological sensitivity toward divine order, he inherited a microcosm that placed ultimate value on the spirit of craftsmanship and pious faith. In the lecture halls of Tübingen, reddened by the glow of mosaics, he learned to perceive the logical skeleton behind every polyphony. He understood that truth was not derived through mere logical deduction, but was an intellectual beauty presented naturally through an ultimate respect for natural law and divine order. This pursuit of absolute harmony became the sole armor that guarded his reality amidst a chaotic world. If his early studies were a reclaiming of the spirit, then his time in 1796 as a tutor in the Gaunted household in Frankfurt was the practical crucible that pushed Hölderlin's aesthetics of emotion to its absolute zenith. He fell in love with Suzette, his employer's wife, and transfigured her into the sacred diatima of his poetry. In those quiet nights where only the rhythmic scratching of a quill could be heard, he balanced classical rhythm and personal agony with ruthless precision, inventing a genre known as the sacred elegy. In that moment, Hölderlin was the most solitary and steady artisan in all of Europe, accepting every blow and misunderstanding of reality with silence. This radical focus rendered him like a marble bell tower, solitary, yet indestructible. In the eyes of a poet, the summit of power is manifested as the penetration of the void. In 1802, upon learning of his beloved diatimus' death, Hölderlin felt for the first time the chilling void of being abandoned by the gods. He began to deduce on paper those ultimate propositions concerning the earth, the river, and the homecoming. He wrote in the preface to his final collection, "I once believed I was building a home, now I find I am merely searching for a point of convergence within the scarred fissures of memory, where the soul no longer falls." This expansive clarity, born of seeing through the rise and fall of life and death, became his hardest armor in his twilight years, allowing him to maintain the serenity of a sun sinking into the Atlantic, even when diagnosed with an incurable affliction. The final season of Hölderlin was spent in a state of solemn silence, illuminated by the radiance of a sage in Tübingen. In the carpenter Zimmer's tower overlooking the Neckar, he spent 36 stable years of twilight. By then, his body had become remarkably light from chronic decline. His world no longer had a name, but only the fictional pseudonym Scardinelli. In his final conscious moments, he requested the carpenter help him to the window to listen one last time to the sound of flowing water, a performance for no audience but his own heart. He closed his eyes and traced a final arc of completion across his chest. The evening breeze carried away the great genius's last sigh. He left behind only this solitary wisdom that still burns, searingly bright, after 200 years. Even today, more than a century after his passing, the name of Hölderlin remains the sole sanctuary for many a restless seeker in the dead of night. What he left behind was not a triumphal column piercing the heavens, but a spiritual template of self-restraint and the vigilance of order. He teaches us that even if the entire world besieges you with turmoil, even if your ideals are destined for long seasons of solitude, the order within your heart is governed solely by your own perception of truth. He maintained absolute lucidity amidst absolute shadows. Beneath the Tübingen tower, its edges now smoothed by history, he remains in a posture of eternal listening, seemingly still soothing this increasingly anxious and restless world. His life was a long, intellectual pilgrimage seeking sacred rhythms amidst a complex and chaotic world. The saga of Friedrich Hölderlin thus draws to a slow close amidst the fading murmur of the Neckar. He was never an opportunist who bartered his poetry for fame. He was merely a weary soul who steadfastly refused to compromise with mediocrity. He reminds us that inner tranquility is your only true and eternal refuge. Believe that every life has its own tower, a private space for dialogue with a self that requires no outward explanation. It lies not in trophies or acclaim, but in your every steady breath and your gentle gaze upon the world. May the serenity and vastness of Hölderlin become the softest feather in your dreams, carrying you toward that most peaceful shore of the inner soul. Good night.